I'm Alex, raised in a broken home by a domineering mother and her intrusive sisters. Megan, the eldest, was 13 years older, and Anna was 10 years my senior. I was probably an unwanted child, blamed for my parents' split. My father left in 1977 when I was 5 and never returned. I was bullied throughout my childhood, both at school and at home. All I yearned for was my mother's love, a simple act of acceptance that never came. Despite the hardships, I excelled academically, dedicating 12 years to my studies. In 1993, I found myself at Kingston University in South London, eager to escape my troubled home life. It was there that I met Holly. Her image is still vivid in my mind. She was beautiful and confident, while I was shy and introverted. Holly was in her final year of a creative writing degree, contrasting with my pursuit of a master's in mechanical engineering and design. I was too shy to approach her, but one of Holly's friends struck up a conversation with me at a party, leading to Holly's eventual inclusion. Despite my limited experience with women, my humility and bashfulness seemed to attract her. Summoning the courage, I asked her out, and we began dating. I'm not ashamed to admit that she took my innocence. However, after about 6 months, rumors surfaced of her involvement with other men. Unable to substantiate the claims, I hesitated to confront her. Holly was a spoiled child, indulged by her parents and her sister Caroline, which strained our relationship. I endured her entitled behavior and her penchant for creating public scenes, causing me embarrassment. Despite my friends urging me to end the relationship, I found myself in love, a feeling I had never experienced before. After graduation, we both found jobs and a flat outside Southampton, New Hampshire. Her family ties drew us there, as I had long severed connections with mine. We married a year later, welcoming Sophie into the world the following year and Ava a couple of years after. Holly relished motherhood, and everything seemed perfect between us. Over time, I advanced in my career, eventually joining Walker Engineering 10 years ago. The increased salary and bonuses helped us save for a better house. But like many during the economic downturn of 2008, it was a tough year. Many lost their jobs and winning contracts became harder, forcing us to work longer hours without extra pay. It was during this time, with both girls in school full-time, that I discovered Holly's affair with a man from our old university. Lost in work, I remained unaware until it was too late. Initially unsure of the identity of her lover, Toby suspected a classmate who had moved nearby. Confronting Holly proved futile, as she laughed off my concerns, though I sensed her deception. Nevertheless, my stable job and income put me in a good position to buy a nice house. Holly constantly pushed me to buy a house that reflected our status, whatever that meant. Despite my reservations, I agreed, and we purchased a lovely detached 5-bedroom house in Southampton. It was a buyer's market, so we snagged a good deal, despite the slightly high mortgage. One thing I did, which was unusual for me, was to open a new savings account in my name only. I only deposited my share of the bonus into it, and since I handled all finances and banking as the sole breadwinner, I doubt Holly even knew about it. Looking back, this turned out to be one of the smartest things I could have done. I needed some security because I wasn't sure if Holly planned to leave me if her old flame returned. After that incident, things seemed to return to normal, and my daughters remained my top priority. I supported their education and spent ample time with them on weekends, taking them to various activities like dance classes, concerts, and the zoo. Holly always seemed too preoccupied with her outings with her indulgent and idle friends. I seldom socialized with other husbands, but we all seemed to be somewhat controlled by our wives to varying degrees. My friends would tease me with the song "Under My Thumb" by the Rolling Stones whenever I had to cancel plans for what Holly wanted. Even at work, my colleagues would make comments about my marital situation, especially Holly's dominance over me. It wasn't until a few months ago that everything came to a head. Ava had just left for university, leaving Holly and me alone for the first time in 18 years. Both our daughters were attending our old alma mater. As I helped Ava settle into her new apartment with her sister, she turned to me and questioned why I was still with their mother. I was taken aback, as Ava had always been quiet like her old man. "I heard she's fooling around with Henry Walker at your company," Ava said, tears welling up in her eyes. It was news to me, but I wasn't shocked. Over the years, I could have investigated her affairs but refrained, fearing it would break up the family and cause my daughters to resent me, just as my sisters did my dad. I tolerated her infidelity because I couldn't bear to lose what we had created, despite still loving her. This revelation had several effects on me. Firstly, it made me realize the depth of my daughters' animosity towards their mother, far greater than I had imagined. Secondly, it brought up old feelings from my upbringing and how they influenced my weaknesses. Finally, I realized I was the subject of gossip and ridicule at work, particularly from Henry Walker, who coincidentally was the nephew of the owner and the man betraying me. I felt utterly lost, unable to continue enduring this situation, especially now that my youngest daughter was aware of the mockery from Holly. I knew I had to confront her. My heart raced as I sat at the kitchen table, waiting for Holly's return. When she finally appeared, I found myself unable to speak. Once again, she merely looked at me with what seemed like apathy and contempt as she unpacked her bags. Eventually, I gathered the courage to speak. I questioned Holly about the nature of her relationship with someone else. She replied that she wouldn't classify it as an affair, insisting it wasn't that significant. I felt a mixture of shock and disgust, waiting for her to explain how her actions could be justified. She expressed her admiration for me as a provider and a friend, but admitted there were certain needs I couldn't fulfill. I was dismayed by her straightforward admission and asked if it meant she was cheating on me. Holly clarified that it was only her body involved, not her heart or mind. Stunned by her audacious admission, I was left speechless. She nonchalantly mentioned exploring relationships with younger men. Startled, I raised my voice, questioning her actions. Holly cautioned me not to shout and, despite admitting to being involved with 2 other men, she expected my silence. She threatened me with the choice of accepting her terms or risking her departure to be with someone else. I remained silent, hoping she would notice the pain on my face. Attempting to justify her actions, she claimed that such behavior was common among her friends and could even improve a marriage. I was appalled by her attempt to use her friend's actions as a justification, considering it contemptible and self-centered. Challenging her with the idea of having another woman, she laughed off the suggestion, mocking my ability to connect with other women. She confidently stated that our relationship would continue on her terms, warning me not to ruin a good thing. In reality, she was right. Throughout our 22-year relationship, I had displayed unwavering loyalty and compliance with her wishes. Now everyone knew I was being betrayed, tarnishing my reputation among friends and colleagues. The next morning, I entered my office and was met by Henry Walker, the man involved with my wife. With a smirk, he inquired about Alex's well-being, his smug expression fueling my frustration. I chose to remain silent. Near the coffee machine, I heard laughter from some men. Despite their amusement, I continued past them, feeling exposed. Even Olivia, the boss's secretary, seemed to find my situation amusing. Seated at my desk, I pondered the rough start to my day, feeling ridiculed both at work and home. Despite my efforts to focus, my anger lingered. I resolved to delve into my father's background, knowing only his birthplace and departure at 38 in 1977. Searching family history sites for Cambridgeshire, I found several potential matches. Anticipating his passing before my university years, I narrowed it down to 3 options and posted inquiries on genealogy websites. Lost in thought, my boss Jack summoned me to his office. Jack, a successful but morally questionable man, wanted to talk. Despite considering leaving due to his behavior, his persuasion and high pay kept me. I discovered his affair with his secretary Olivia, unbeknownst to his 3rd wife. He plainly mentioned hearing rumors about my wife's infidelity. I retorted, mentioning her involvement with my nephew. He acknowledged the behavior, chuckling about the family trait of being cads, leaving me in silence. The focus shifted to business, emphasizing the importance of family and warning that if the personal issues affected the business, I might have to leave the company. It was delivered like a strict teacher scolding a child. I bit my lip, noticing Olivia, his eager secretary, lingering by the door, likely gathering information to share with her friends. As I turned to exit, I couldn't help but wonder why a young woman like her would involve herself with an older man like Jack Walker. Passing by her, I heard more snickering, prompting me to lower my head and walk away. As the door closed behind me, laughter erupted, clearly directed at my expense. Returning to my office, I realized my presence there served no purpose. I had funded my daughter's education, yet now I was mentally financing my wife's infidelities. I was a simple guy who enjoyed his gadgets but could live without extravagances. The majority of my expenses went toward Holly's indulgences, leaving me questioning my happiness. It was my haven for creativity and success. I had designed many of the parts being produced and sold here, and I was confident I could find employment elsewhere. They saw me as weak, and they weren't wrong. I wasn't one to stir up trouble. I was content being good old Alex, the submissive engineer. Glancing at my screensaver of the family vacation, I clicked on my email. To my surprise, there was a message waiting from a woman named Jennifer Holmes from the Cambridge Genealogy Committee. Astonished by the quick response, I read the message and was amazed. Jennifer had read my inquiry about my dad and had connected with a woman claiming to be his niece, Rachel Murray, my cousin. I promptly replied with my contact information, hoping to hear from Rachel soon. Leaving work brought some relief, and upon arriving home, Holly greeted me with a smile while cooking dinner. Though I distanced myself initially, I returned for the meal. She softly asked if we could discuss the previous night, to which I responded that it seemed there was little left to discuss, as she had made her stance clear. In response, she almost pleaded, acknowledging my qualities as a husband and requesting that I not deny her anything. I questioned her betrayal and humiliation, seeking an honest answer. Flustered, she shrugged, unable to provide a satisfactory response. Growing weary of her selfishness, I reflected on my efforts to make her happy. Despite working long hours to meet our financial needs and desires, I only received disrespect and mockery. I even drove an older car so she could have a newer one. She acknowledged having needs that I couldn't fulfill and presented an ultimatum. Accept it, as she assumed I would, or she would seek satisfaction with a younger man. I interjected, mentioning Henry Walker's name, stating that everyone knew he was involved with her. She admitted to the involvement, bluntly revealing that he was essentially my boss and would inherit the company. She outlined the arrangement. He fulfilled her needs in bed, and if I didn't comply and accept, she would leave me, and he would provide everything else she wanted and needed. As usual, I said nothing and simply rose from my seat, retreating to my study. Tears flowed, and I wished to be anywhere but here. As the phone rang, I answered to hear an unfamiliar voice on the other end. It was Rachel. We conversed for about an hour, and when I hung up, everything else faded from my mind, and I wore a huge smile. Rachel was thrilled that I had decided to explore my father's past and had much to share. I discovered that my mother had indeed forced my father out of the house, deceiving me throughout my childhood. Sadly, he passed away in 1983 when I was just 11, succumbing to drink poisoning. My grandmother always blamed my mother for his behavior and mental state. Rachel informed me that after leaving us, he yearned to reconnect with me but was prevented from doing so. We arranged to meet over the weekend at her home in Cambridge. I was excited, knowing the break would be beneficial. The remainder of the week dragged on. Things at home remained unchanged, and at work, I was continually ridiculed behind my back. Henry and his friends found it amusing to hang a pair of underwear on my office door. Enclosed in the underwear was a post-it note that read, "Please return to your wife." I was shattered. I sat at my desk and wept. Once again, that day, wanting to blame everyone but myself. I couldn't wait for Saturday to come. I informed Holly that I was visiting a friend in London, and she seemed indifferent to my plans. I suspected she would be unfaithful, so being away made it easier for her. The journey to Cambridge proved stressful, and I arrived at Rachel's house an hour later than expected. Surprisingly, she welcomed me with the warmest hug I'd received in years, seemingly unfazed by the delay. I met her husband Greg and their children, Grace and William, after which we dove into discussions about my father and newfound family. Rachel's warm and selfless demeanor was evident as she and Greg conversed animatedly, often finishing each other's sentences, eager to share our family story. Joined by David and Lucy Price, my cousin and Rachel's brother, we bonded well, exchanging insights about my father and family. After lunch, we took a short trip, affording me time to reflect. Upon our return, David and I discussed our jobs and family lives, and for some reason, I found myself confiding in my new cousins. They offered unwavering support, advising me not to tolerate my current situation. Leaving Cambridge, I felt a renewed perspective, having endured numerous lies and mistreatment. The kindness and honesty shown by my newfound family gave me hope. I realized I needed to reclaim happiness, not only for myself but also for my daughters, friends, and this new family. Returning home at 8 p.m., I found Holly getting ready to go out. I inquired about her plans, and she replied that she was going out with her friends. Catching her off guard, I mentioned her second paramour, Max. She pleaded for me to stop bringing it up, seemingly indifferent to my feelings. I urged her to stop and be my wife, dismissing my concerns. She insisted that she was and always would be my wife. She asked me not to deny her pleasures, promising to make life easy for me and assuring she would be back by midnight. Ignoring my pleas, she continued to threaten, attempting to embrace me as I turned away. Unfazed, she grabbed her Prada handbag and headed for the door, asserting my position as her husband. I sternly asked her not to proceed with her plans. She paused, looking at me as if questioning my authority before bursting into laughter. Mockingly, she asked what I would do, asserting that I would never have the courage to leave her and predicting that I would always be there for her. Crestfallen, I dropped my head, realizing I had been a fool for far too long, catering to her selfishness while neglecting my own needs. It was time to end the charade and make plans for change. I wasted no time in taking action. Actually, I began while she was out with Henry or Max, maybe both together. That's likely what she meant by indulging in her desires and having it all. My thoughts fueled my anger, causing me to lose focus. I needed to find a way to eradicate any remaining affection I held for her, and I believe I found a solution. I located the box containing a specific picture of my mom and sisters, the only one I had. Though skeptical, I cut out a picture of Holly's face and pasted it next to them. With no love left for them, adding Holly's smirking face to the picture might just sever my emotional ties. Placing it on my study desk, around 12:45 a.m., I completed the task. I had mostly devised my short-term plans, even though executing them might take a few weeks. Fortunately, I had the luxury of time, as Holly wasn't anticipating my departure. Though uncertain and requiring assistance, I had convinced myself by then to follow through. I heard someone entering clumsily through the door, and peeking out the window, I witnessed Henry Walker's departure. As I heard her ascending the stairs, I hastily cleared my browsing history, resolving to use incognito mode henceforth. After she retired to our bedroom, I descended the stairs to brew some coffee, reflecting on my future away from here, especially without my daughters. I found it tolerable, deciding to relocate closer to my daughters come Monday morning. I headed to work, resolved not to exert myself any longer, unperturbed by the remarks and laughter directed at me. I arranged a bank meeting for 1 p.m., utilizing the time before to review my finances. Though a gamble, if successful and with the right support, I'd emerge relatively unscathed. The meeting proceeded as planned, allowing me to close my savings account and remove my name from our joint account. With a tidy sum in hand, I shut down the savings account for cash en route back to the office. I stopped at a PC World, purchasing 2 digital voice recorders, a 500 gigabytes USB 3.0 tough drive, and a new PC hard drive. Upon returning, I commenced accessing the company's private customer files, a task that took me an hour to crack Jack's password. Ironically, his wife's name and his 6-digit birthday secured the necessary access. I downloaded all the files to the drive, along with my plans and designs for the energy-efficient hydraulic pump system, positioning the company for continued success. We manufactured pumps for air conditioning units, heavy machinery, and even for the dairy industry. After clearing my PC history, including all plans and work, I shut it down, swapped out the hard drive for a new one, packed everything in my bag, and reinstalled Windows. The remainder of the day was spent researching competitors on my phone and browsing engineering jobs in the South London/Surrey area on Monster before calling it a day. That evening, following another quiet dinner, I retired to my study, discovering that a major competitor which had struggled during the financial downturn sought a mechanical engineer for basic design and shop floor management. It intrigued me, though not precisely what I desired. It was close. Despite the £10,000 lower salary offer compared to my current one, I promptly emailed them my CV. To maintain appearances with Holly, I opted to sleep in our marital bed that night. However, I ensured to sleep when she entered, her touch making me feel nauseous. Oddly, it pleased me to react this way. I was growing repulsed by her, which would aid me in the long run. The next day, a surprised Robert Williams from Sutton Hydraulics called, expressing disbelief at my potential move from Walker Engineering to his smaller firm. Although he nearly offered me the job immediately, I requested an interview the following day, which he agreed to. Another crucial piece had fallen into place, and things were progressing rapidly. With ample time on hand, I began researching flats in the area, eventually finding one just 15 minutes from my daughter's and 5 minutes from work. I scheduled a viewing for the day after the interview with Robert Williams. Subsequently, I informed Jack about needing to visit my daughters in Kingston to sign some papers the next day, to which he casually agreed. That night, I phoned my longtime friend Toby Brown, arranging to meet him and his wife Sarah the following evening after my interview and flat viewing. Toby and Sarah, aware that I had something on my mind, eagerly awaited my explanation. Before meeting them, I spoke to my daughters about the situation, receiving their supportive and understanding responses. At the gathering with Toby and Sarah, I disclosed the details of the initial phase of my plans. Their surprise at my decision to fight back outweighed any shock over Holly's infidelity, a common occurrence in their view. Sarah inquired about my decision to leave Holly, offering me another cup of tea. I recounted the revelations from the meeting with my cousins, including my father's expulsion from the house by my mother and my sisters siding with her. I noted that my daughter supported me this time. Toby expressed concern, questioning if the discovery at the meeting had spurred me to stand up for myself. I clarified that it was during a visit to my father's grave that I noticed something on the stone that shocked me and prompted my decision to leave. They both asked simultaneously about what I had seen on the memorial stone. I shared that it featured a rose image with the words "in loving memory," followed by my father's birth date and age at passing, coincidentally my current age. Toby and Sarah slightly recoiled, indicating their understanding. I explained that I faced a choice when confronted with moments that could lead to drink-loving or worse, as my grandmother believed. I decided not to emulate my father and instead chose to fight back. I continued, revealing that I wouldn't sacrifice myself trying to be the perfect husband any longer, enduring misuse and ridicule. I confessed to my friends feeling vulnerable about how low I had sunk. Sarah offered help and shared her plan to protect herself and get back at Holly. I smiled and nodded, appreciating Sarah's toughness, despite previous suspicions of her affair. Explaining my financial strategy, I shared that in 2008, I established a separate savings account, depositing all my bonuses and extra cash. Securing a mortgage required only my name, making it easier for me to apply a loan. I outlined Toby's role in transferring ownership of my house to a new company he would create to settle the mortgage, transferring the deeds through the land registry. Toby voiced skepticism about the plan, but I assured him that Holly wouldn't have the means to contest it. I pointed out that her religious parents, upon discovering her infidelity, would prioritize their principles over supporting her. They agreed and even offered to help cover the mortgage, allowing me to delay payment. On my way home, I visited the local Land Rover dealership, where I negotiated to trade Holly's car for the latest model. We terminated the payment plan for the Range Rover Sport she had, benefiting the dealership from reselling it. I assured the dealer that I would return for my own upgrade, knowing he could recoup the cost of Holly's car by selling it as practically brand new. I apologized for any inconvenience but explained that the prospect of selling me an expensive new Range Rover more than compensated. Upon leaving, I picked up a 2016 brochure, not for myself but for Holly. Upon arriving home, she sat in the lounge, nursing a coffee and looking pale. I removed my jacket and tossed my bag onto the floor, preparing to enact the second part of the plan. I expressed my love for Holly and my desire for her to have the best. I declared that I would trade in her car and buy her a new 2017 model, pointing to it in the brochure. Expressing her enthusiasm, she exclaimed that she loved the new car, unaware of my plan. She acknowledged my ability to make her feel better, mentioning the only hiccup being that they already had a buyer for my car. She proposed taking it to the dealership by Friday afternoon, leaving work early for the task. She suggested I use her car for the weekend to visit my lovers, causing her to recoil at the final remark. A look of shock and confusion crossed her face as she inquired about what was wrong. I prompted her to address the situation. She mentioned nothing specific but asked if I was still upset about our arrangement. I clarified that it was not our arrangement but rather hers, emphasizing that I had no say in it. I questioned if I had no choice but to accept it, hoping for a response. She simply nodded, appearing as if she had asserted her dominance, and I had surrendered. Despite the circumstances, she declared that she loved me, expressing genuine concern. I said nothing in reply and walked off into the kitchen. My phone began to ring, so I headed out to the back garden to take the call. Toby confirmed the money had been transferred. I was good to go the next day. Without delay, I entered the bank and was shown into the mortgage specialist's office. An hour later, the mortgage was paid off, and all my remaining accounts were closed. I walked a few doors down and opened a new account with another bank. I was content, knowing I wouldn't have to pay anything again unless Holly pursued legal action and took me to court. My smile faded the next day. I contacted the land registry and completed the appropriate online application with all the details of Toby and Sarah's new company. Within 10 minutes of applying, I received a confirmation email stating it would take 3 to 5 days to complete. Once done, I would simply hand over the deeds to Toby, and he could register the property to his company that same day. I knocked on Jack's door. Olivia was with him as usual. Fridays were typically when he had his way with her, and I believe I interrupted their closeness activities. She left us alone, placing my resignation on his desk. He looked up at me with that stupid smirk on his face, inquiring about the document in my hands. I replied that it was my resignation and expressed the belief that leaving immediately would be best, considering the situation with our families. I suggested that he might not want me around for too long. He appeared dumbstruck by the news. I boldly requested that my P45 be ready by Monday and emphasized not mentioning my departure to anyone. Holly didn't know. He pleaded pathetically, insisting that they needed me. I countered by saying they apparently needed his nephew more. I informed him that I would return on Monday to collect the last of my things. Discreetly, I pretended to drop a pin from my pocket, using the opportunity to remove a digital recorder from my sock. Constructing a pin for it, I hit record and discreetly placed it under the seat and into the wooden frame as I stood back up. Concluding the conversation, I mentioned having things to do and left his office. As a parting shot, I told him not to come crawling back when he's broke, suggesting that the only thing keeping his cheating wife with him was his money. I smiled, knowing that it hit a nerve. Turning, I left his office. An hour later, I drove home, picked up Holly's car and logbook, and dropped off her car at the dealership. John Reeves kindly offered to drive me home, and I accepted gratefully. When I got home that night, Holly was sitting at the kitchen table with big red bags under her eyes. I knew she had been crying. I asked her what happened, and reluctantly, she told me she had contracted gonorrhea. I laughed. Oh, did I laugh? She just glared at me. He suggested taking the medications to get back to normal, and the tension in the air was palpable. That night, for the first time in months, I slept well. The next morning, I slept in the spare room and felt refreshed. The good night's sleep had done wonders for me. I entered our bedroom and gently woke Holly, explaining that I was giving her space to rest and recuperate. Holly expressed a belief that I found her disgusting, to which I remained silent. Tears started streaming down her cheeks as she admitted to messing up big time. She professed her love for me and expressed a desire for me to get better. Initially, I felt sympathy for her, but it vanished quicker than expected. That surprised me. It dawned on me then that I had lost all affection for the woman I had been married to for 21 years. Could love truly fade away so swiftly? Apparently so, because I was done, and her situation did nothing to sway me. I left the room without saying a word. I got into my car and drove off contentedly. That night, I stayed with Toby and Sarah, who hosted a dinner party with many friends and colleagues present. When I returned home late Sunday morning, I found Holly up, doing chores. Walking into the lounge, she rushed towards me and hugged me when she saw me. I simply patted her on the back. Excitedly, I suggested arranging for the new car to arrive, offering to drop her off in town to meet her sister who could then drive her to the dealership. I envisioned her driving back in the new Range Rover, and she smiled. Approaching me with open arms, I turned back to the kettle, pretending not to notice her. Throughout the day, Holly displayed excessive affection, making me feel uncomfortable. She persistently tried to kiss or hug me, but I kept finding excuses to leave. By bedtime, I noticed she had been crying again. Wishing her good night, she inquired if I would be sleeping with her and expressed a desire to cuddle up and hear reassurances. Feeling nothing, I responded that it wouldn't happen until she got the all-clear from the doctor. I firmly asserted that she made her bed, to which she retorted bitterly, stating that when she got better, she was sure she could find a man willing to be in bed with her, as she had plenty of lost time to make up for. I chuckled to myself. Took longer than expected, but there it was, and the harshness was back. All the regrets from Friday night had vanished, leaving behind 21 years of resentment. In the past, I would have fallen for her manipulations, but this time, I ignored her tears and headed for the spare room. It would be my last night in my house, and it would be in the spare room. I was also relieved she said those things. It erased any lingering doubts I might have had. As I looked at my doctored picture of her and my sisters, all I felt was hatred for her. She was only sweet when she wanted something and nasty when she didn't get it. I woke early Monday morning. Holly was up early too, for her 8:30 hair appointment, so I drove her into town as planned. I drove off knowing it could be the last time I ever saw her. I feared it wouldn't be, but I was determined to make it so. On the way, I called the mobile phone company and terminated both our contracts, pulling over into a lobby. I paid the penalty on my card, and they informed me that the phones would remain in service until 5 p.m. Perfect. Next, I headed to the office to pick up my P45. I stepped into the factory, greeted by a somber atmosphere. Word of my departure seemed to have spread, briefly eliciting looks of fear from my colleagues, unsure of the reason behind their unease. I made my way down the corridor toward my office, passing by the coffee machine where the usual group was gathered. Uncertain if Max and Henry were aware of their shared involvement with my wife, they grinned at me, exchanging jokes with others. I greeted them with false cheer, saying good morning. They asked about my wife, prompting the usual laughter at the recurring joke, which I failed to find amusing. I replied that she wasn't doing well, attributing it to one of them giving her an unwelcome surprise. I left them in stunned silence, and when I glanced back, their jaws had dropped, leading to a commotion. Before I headed upstairs, approaching Olivia, she offered a half smile and lowered her head, perhaps indicating that I was now earning some respect. Jack appeared at the door before I could knock, asserting that he had what I wanted, instructing me to take it and get out. Perhaps that respect was merely my imagination. Entering his office, I sat down, discreetly slipping a recorder into my pocket from under the chair. I knew he'd had his usual Friday rendezvous with Olivia, and now I had it recorded. He snapped, inquiring if I had another job lined up. Initially ignoring him, I relented and replied that I had nothing lined up. A smirk played across his face, likely assuming I would come crawling back. I inquired about my final month's pay and end-of-year bonus, to which he burst into laughter. Olivia entered with my P45, and when she asked what was amusing, Jack explained that I had requested my bonus and pay, finding it rich. Olivia chimed in, laughing along. Deciding to join in, I responded with laughter, causing them to pause and stare at me incredulously. Olivia questioned why I was laughing, and I retorted, asking her why she let the old man take advantage of her every week. My laughter intensified, and they froze, with Olivia's eyes widening as Jack flushed with rage. In response to Jack's anger, he spat out, calling me a scoundrel and instructing me to get out of his office and his company before he had the boys drag me out by my ears. Chuckling, I exited, collecting the last of my belongings from my office, still laughing to myself. I arrived home, unloaded the back seats, opened the trunk, and entered the house, surveying the rooms. I pondered what to take with me, retrieving a few Romero Brito artworks. I wrapped them in plastic found in the garage and loaded them into my car. I went around the house, collecting various items, then emptied my wardrobe upstairs. I secured all my important paperwork, including the girls' birth certificates and my wedding certificate from the safe. Utilizing a loft ladder, I retrieved my old belongings, including my degree and family photos in the master bedroom. I gathered all the jewelry I had gifted Holly over the years, totaling over £10,000 in value. I also took all the handbags, shoes, and expensive coats I had purchased. In fact, the entire wardrobe was my acquisition, so I claimed it all. Given my meticulous record-keeping for insurance purposes, it would prove beneficial when selling everything. After finishing packing, I realized I'd need a TV, so I grabbed that along with my movie collection and the Blu-ray player. By now, my car was too full. I decided to ditch all of Holly's clothes and a few other unnecessary items, including some of my old clothes. Annam would need a new wardrobe, and the girls would gladly help me out. I gathered the best pictures of me and the girls and packed them in the car. No real rush, since Holly wouldn't be back until after 2 p.m. I took a moment for a cup of tea, a must-have. I believe it's in the Magna Carta. I called the TV company and canceled the satellite, phone, and internet. I also contacted British Gas and Southern Water to cancel utilities. It would take a few days, but I didn't care. Returning to the bedroom, I sat on the bed when I noticed something that sparked an idea, one that scared even me. Holly's wedding dress sat at the top of the wardrobe in a dusty old box. She loved it, probably more than me. I took it down and found our wedding album among the box of photographs on the bed. I grabbed the duvet cover, gathered everything, and headed to the garden. I dumped everything into a pile, including Holly's clothes and belongings I couldn't sell. I left her underwear untouched. I didn't want any reminders. I closed up the car and checked the time. It was only 1:45 p.m. I called up Robert Williams and told him I'd drop off my P45 later with the night shift, eager to start fresh tomorrow. He seemed pleased, and I hoped I'd brightened his day. At 2 p.m., I sat waiting for the call. I found some paint thinners in the garage and poured it all over the wedding dress in the garden. Just as I was about to light the fire, my phone rang. I answered, and Holly's voice came through the phone, demanding to know what was going on. I replied sarcastically, asking her what she meant, insisting that she shouldn't play dumb. She continued to question me. I asked her to calm down and inquired about what was happening. There was silence, and I could hear her heavy breathing and what sounded like her sister in the background. She mentioned that she had been told I didn't get her a new car but sold hers instead. Teasingly, I mentioned that I might have forgotten to mention that. She started to sound panicked, asking what was going on. Remaining calm, despite my racing heart, I informed her that from now on, if she wanted a car, she could pay for it herself. She yelled in response, expressing confusion and frustration. I reiterated that she heard me just fine and added that I needed to tidy up the kitchen. She questioned if it was some kind of sick joke, to which I said nothing. She declared that we would talk about it when she got home, expressing her dissatisfaction with being pranked. I remained silent. I hung up the phone amidst her continued screams of my name. Stepping outside, I struck a match and ignited the pyre. Our history went up in flames as I walked away, retrieving our marriage certificate from my pocket. I tore it into shreds and left it on the kitchen table, alongside a lone photograph of us at Disneyland, capturing happier times. I wondered if she reminisced fondly about those moments too. Sliding into my car, I drove off. Approaching the end of the street, I glimpsed Holly and Jennifer in my rearview mirror, rushing into the house without a glance upward. With a smile, I powered off my phone and drove on. By 4 p.m., I reached Sutton, deciding I had time. I visited a nearby phone shop to set up a new mobile contract. Additionally, I caught the admin team at work to handle my P45 and met Freya, my new secretary, who, unlike Olivia, exuded professionalism despite her youth. Returning to my empty flat, I brewed a cup of tea with a kettle borrowed from home. I unpacked and ordered pizza for dinner. Checking my old phone, I found it disconnected. A smirk crossing my lips, knowing Holly was now phoneless too, affording the girls some respite before my inevitable contact. Setting up my sleeping bag in the lounge, I awaited dinner. Furniture would arrive over the weekend, but for now, I relished the distance from Holly. Switching on my laptop, I accessed recordings from Jack Walker's office, revealing his affair with Olivia. After uploading the evidence, I made copies on USB sticks, addressing them to Jack's wife Margaret and Olivia's boyfriend Peter. I planned to mail them the next day. Lastly, I phoned my daughter Sophie to update her, cautioning against informing her mother of my whereabouts, which she hadn't done yet, given Holly's lack of communication means. Over the following week, I furnished my flat and began diverting customers from Walker Engineering to Sutton. Despite a few loyal to Jack, most preferred our offerings, leading to Walker's loss. I anticipated Jack's discovery of the reason for his business decline but remained indifferent. With utilities cut off at my former home, Hollywood realized my absence as she struggled with bills. Toby initiated the home sale process, backed by Sarah's enthusiasm, and by week's end, signs adorned the property. During this time, AA contacted me, revealing Holly's relocation to her parents' home, where disapproval lingered over her infidelity. Holly seethed with rage toward me, which oddly gratified me. Though I knew the saga wasn't over, by the weekend, Toby and Sarah hosted another successful dinner party, offering a moment of respite from my escape plan. Sunday brought promising news. After just a week on the market, I received 2 serious offers for £550,000, one of which I accepted immediately. Preparing for the completion, I arranged visits for the girls and investments, ensuring Toby was compensated and securing a portion in cash for my safety. Protecting myself remained a priority as the week progressed. Toby's news that the sale could move swiftly filled me with delight. I promptly reached out to a removal company, tasking them with clearing out my former home. Meanwhile, the girls contacted their mother, who responded with heightened anger and threats, assuring the girls that the turmoil would soon end. I offered them solace on Tuesday morning during a conversation with a new client who had recently met with Jack Walker to discuss a possible contract renewal. I learned of Walker Engineering's dire situation. The client revealed that due to a significant loss of projects, the company had to lay off 50% of its staff. Additionally, he informed me of Mrs. Walker's decision to divorce Jack over his infidelity. Despite this revelation, I felt no sympathy. My mind preoccupied with calculating commission checks, I remained unaware of Olivia and her boyfriend's fate. I knew he had received my gift, whether Mrs. Walker had received hers or not. The reason behind their impending divorce was undoubtedly clear. I pondered what Mrs. Walker's friends and family would think of her affair with an older man. In recognition of my efforts, I was rewarded with a brand new Land Rover Discovery HSE. Although I had contemplated treating myself beforehand, Robert and the executives were so pleased with my performance and the company's trajectory that they bestowed upon me the car, along with a substantial commission surpassing £30,000. Gazing out of my office window at my new car, I was taken aback when a familiar Ford Focus pulled into the parking lot. I discovered the car belonged to Diane, Holly's mother. Anticipating an inevitable confrontation, I braced myself as my office phone rang. My secretary Freya informed me that there was a woman claiming to be my wife in the reception. I instructed her to tell the woman that I was in a meeting and that I would be down in an hour. 3 hours later, I glanced out the window to find her still waiting. With a sigh, I decided to leave for the night, prepared to confront her if necessary or simply drive past if she didn't spot me. Exiting through a side door, I headed toward my car. As I was about to get in, I heard tires screech, and before I knew it, she had blocked me in with her car. Stepping out, she stormed toward me with fury evident in her disheveled appearance. Clearly distressed and clad in worn-out clothes that appeared to be her sister's, her unkempt hair added to her disarray. "You damn idiot!" she screamed, attempting to slap me but missing her mark. Fueled by rage, she demanded retribution. Urging her to calm down, I invited her to sit in the car with me. Surprised by the sight of the new car, she expressed her financial struggles and pleaded for my return. I informed her that since I couldn't fulfill her needs and didn't match up to her younger lovers, I felt redundant in her life. She then pleaded for me to come home, expressing a desire to move past the situation and forgiving me. I couldn't believe my ears and asked if she was kidding. She affirmed that she forgave me for wrecking her things and her life. Questioning her forgiveness, I pointed out the open cheating, disrespect, and her nerve to claim forgiveness. I stated firmly that I would never be with her again and coldly suggested she go be with one of her lovers. She mentioned that her friends treated her differently now that they were separated, and their husbands questioned their fidelity. While acknowledging some responsibility for her misfortunes, I still sympathized with her. She admitted to facing consequences for her actions, having squandered a good life due to greed and disrespect. Despite this, I knew I had to move forward. She pleaded for me to come back into her life, claiming to have nothing left. She inquired about her share of the house and mentioned her need for a divorce. I pointed out that she had never once said she loved me, stating that she just needed me, but I didn't need her. I disclosed that I had defaulted on the mortgage and lost the house, admitting to lying. Her reaction was one of shock, and I understood the purpose of her visit. Declaring my desire for a divorce, she pleaded desperately, claiming to love me after over 20 years together. She pleaded, acknowledging a mistake and claiming severe punishment. I emphasized that it was a huge, unforgivable mistake, stating firmly that I would never return to her. She screamed and begged, filling the car with her cries. Offering a proposition, I suggested a clean break and offered £30,000 in cash if she agreed. Her demeanor changed, and she became resolute. She yelled, threatening to fight me in court for everything, asserting that I didn't lose the house and was too smart for that. Acknowledging her correctness, I found myself on the defensive. I started by stating firmly that she wouldn't get a penny from me. She squared up to me, and I explained that I would fight her for everything and more. I asserted that she had no money, and I would move my assets around to make it difficult for her to track them down. I warned her that by the time her lawyer found anything, the bill would wipe out any gain. I gave her a choice: take the money offered or face the consequences of a legal battle, never breaking eye contact. She exclaimed angrily, expressing love and accusing me of mistreatment. She continued, stating that thanks to her, our girls would thrive, contrasting their future virtues with her perceived shortcomings. I told her to take the money and get out of my life, and she spat back, agreeing to take the money and proceed with the divorce. I responded that I would arrange it, and she exited my car, slamming the door shut. Moments later, she sped away from the car park. The following day, I initiated divorce proceedings, citing infidelity as the grounds. A week later, I arranged a meeting with Holly at the girls' apartment. Despite the completed sale of my house, I postponed investing until the papers were signed. Maintaining civility in front of the girls proved challenging. I handed Holly the cash, and she proceeded to sign the papers. After bidding farewell to the girls and wishing Holly luck, I prepared to leave. Holly suddenly burst into tears, though I sensed it might have been more for the girls' benefit. Sophie and Ava exchanged knowing glances. Ava mentioned seeing me next weekend, referring to the Coldplay concert they were excited about. I returned to the room where Holly continued to sob, unnoticed by the others. Suddenly, I realized what Ava meant about the concert. Sophie inquired about our plans, and I mentioned checking with Amy and letting them know during the week. Before departing, ignoring Holly's shouting as I left, I closed the door behind me.